Hello, hockey fans, and welcome back to another episode of Buyer's Remorse, the series where we look back at some of the biggest trades, signings, or other acquisitions in league history, but teams didn't quite get what they paid for. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at one of the worst front office appointments the National Hockey League has ever seen, as we explore why the hiring of Mike Milbury gave the New York Islanders all the buyer's remorse. In order to understand why the Islanders would regret this move so badly, let's go back to the very beginning. On July 5th, 1995, the New York Islanders announced that they had hired 11-year veteran of the league and former Boston Bruins defenceman Mike Milbury to serve as the team's new head coach. At the time, this hiring seemed like a good move for the organisation, since Milbury had built himself an impressive track record behind the bench, coaching the Boston Bruins between 1989 and 1991 and leading the team to both a pair of first-place finishes in their division as well as an appearance in the 1990 Stanley Cup Finals. This kind of regular season dominance and deep postseason success was just what the Islanders were looking for, as they had failed to find success in either category over the past few years, missing the playoffs in 4 of their last 7 seasons and only making it out of the first round once. After Milbury led the Islanders to a rather disappointing 22-50-10 record during the 95-96 season, one of the worst records in the league that year, on December 12, 1996, it was announced that Milbury would be replacing Darcy Regier as the team's new general manager, where he promptly appointed Rick Bowness to succeed him in the head coaching position. However, with the Islanders in the playoff hunt near the conclusion of the following 97-98 season, Milbury decided that he would take matters into his own hands, moving back behind the bench and taking the head coaching position once again alongside his GM duties. And to the surprise of no one, the Islanders would ultimately miss out on the postseason. Despite his inability to coach this team to a winning record, Milbury would stay behind the bench for the first half of the following 98-99 season, before relinquishing his coaching duties for a second time and returning solely to the team's front office in 1999. Milbury's years of flip-flopping between coach and GM, coupled with the talent level on the Islanders roster, had resulted in the team missing out on the playoffs in each of the 4 seasons since Milbury had joined the franchise, making it a grand total of 5 straight years since the organisation had even sniffed postseason hockey, a far cry from their 4-cup dynasty of the early 80s. However, if you thought Mike Milbury the coach was bad, allow me to introduce you to Mike Milbury the GM. With his new, undisputed position in the Islanders organisation, Milbury was under strict orders from ownership to run the ship on a tight budget. The owners didn't want to overpay their top players or sign them to big money contracts, so the emphasis was placed on finding younger, cheaper roster players and prospects that could be just as productive as other well-paid stars around the league, but on a budget. An example of this was when Milbury traded 3-time 87-point scorer Zygmunt Polfi to Los Angeles in 1999 because the team didn't want to pay his yearly salary. However, even when player finances or even the owner's unwillingness to pay up weren't a factor, especially when the Islanders changed ownership in 2000 to a group more willing to spend, Mike Milbury would become synonymous with making trades and transactions that included shipping off these very same young players in return for more established names in the league or quick fix solutions in order to try and get the Islanders back into the playoffs. Though these trades and decisions would have varying levels of success, most of them ended up being so bad for the Islanders franchise, both at the time and in hindsight, that pretty much every single one of these following trades could be their own episode of Buyer's Remorse. Let's go through some of them now, shall we, folks? There's probably going to be a few deals that I've left off this list, but considering the sheer number of awful trades that this guy made, I've tried my best to highlight the real stinkers. Buckle up, folks, it's going to be quite the journey. Let's take things in chronological order, and start as we mean to go on with January 23rd, 1996, when Milbury traded defenceman Wade Redden and goaltender Damian Rhodes to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for goaltender Don Bope, defenceman Brian Berard, and forward Martin Straka. Once leaving the Islanders organisation, Redden would go on to be named an NHL All-Star in 2002, win the league's plus-minus award in 2006, and score 457 points in 1,023 NHL games, whilst Rhodes would be no scrub either, playing in 309 NHL games of his own. As you will come to expect with Milbury's trades, this deal wouldn't bring him anything close to an equal return. Bopra would never play a single game either for the Islanders or for the rest of his 17-year NHL career. Berard would play just 191 games over 3 seasons for New York and score 109 points, before leaving the team and returning for one final season at the end of his career, while Straka would play just 22 games for the Islanders and score 12 points, before he was placed on waivers and claimed by the Florida Panthers. To make this deal even worse, Straka would go on to play 954 NHL games and score 717 points, with his best season being a 95-point year in 2000/01. It's clear that this deal alone was bad enough for both Milbury and the Islanders, but think of it as the appetizer to Milbury's trade history, the opening chapter or the tutorial level, if you will. Believe me, folks, we've only just scratched the surface. How about on November 17th, 1996, when Milbury traded forward Andreas Johansson and defenseman Darius Kasparaitis to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for forward Brian Smolinski? Johansson would go on to play 377 NHL games and score a respectable 169 points, while Kasparaitis would play 863 NHL games, score 163 points, garner the reputation as a top defensive defenseman in the league during his prime, and was even inducted into the Russian Hockey Hall of Fame. On the flip side, for the Islanders, Smolinski would play just 3 of his 15 NHL seasons on Long Island and score 139 points in 227 games, before moving on to the Los Angeles Kings. Okay, so this wasn't the worst trade imaginable, but it still wasn't great, was it? Then there was a pretty big one on February 6th, 1998, when Milbury traded forward Todd Bertuzzi, defenseman Brian McCabe, and a 1998 third-round pick to the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for forward Trevor Linden. Bertuzzi and McCabe would end up combining for 1,296 points in 2,294 NHL games, whilst Linden would play just 107 games with the Islanders and score 64 points before heading north to the Montreal Canadiens. And that's not even mentioning the third rounder that ended up being used to select Jarkko Ruutu, who also played 652 NHL games. Are you starting to see a pattern here? What about on March 20th, 1999, when Milbury traded goaltender Tommy Salo, who Milbury had reportedly reduced to tears during a salary arbitration hearing prior, to the Edmonton Oilers for forward Mats Lindgren and a 1999 third-round pick. Lindgren would play 134 games over 4 seasons with New York and score 46 points, whilst the third-rounder would end up being used to select defenseman Radik Martinek, who would play almost all of his 486 NHL games with the Islanders. However, Salo would play his best hockey away from Long Island, posting 2 30-win seasons and 4 straight seasons with 27 wins or more for the Oilers. One of the worst trades that Milbury made, though, was on June 24th, 2000, when he traded forward Olli Jokinen and goaltender Roberto Luongo to the Florida Panthers for forwards Oleg Kvasha and Mark Parrish. Olli Jokinen and Roberto Luongo for Oleg Kvasha and Mark Parrish. Though the Islanders would receive one of their best returns out of all of these transactions, since Kvasha and Parrish combined for 667 games and 370 points on Long Island, this deal would keep Milbury and the Islanders up at night. Jokinen would end up playing 1,231 NHL games and score 750 points, posting a career-high 91-point year in 06-07, whilst Luongo would go on to become one of the best goaltenders the National Hockey League has ever seen, posting a 489, 392 and 33 record in 1,044 games, as well as being named a 6-time All-Star, sitting third all-time in wins, and earning a number of franchise records for both the Panthers and the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, this one wasn't good. Oh, but we're not done there. How about another deal on June 24th, 2000, when Milbury traded defenceman Eric Brewer, forward Josh Green, and a 2000 second-round pick to the Edmonton Oilers for defenceman Roman Hamrlik. Green would play 341 NHL games and score 76 points. The second-rounder would be used to select Brad Winchester, who would play 390 NHL games, and Brewer would go on to play 1,009 NHL games, score 271 points, and be named an NHL All-Star. On the flip side, Hamrlik would play 300 games with the Islanders, score 153 points, and receive his third All-Star appearance. Hey, at least one of Milbury's acquisitions became an All-Star, right guys? Brewer got one too though, so I guess Milbury broke even on this one at best. Despite all the terrible trades we have just looked at though, arguably the very worst deal that Mike Milbury made as the Islanders' general manager was on June 23rd, 2001, when he traded forward Bill Muckholt, defenceman Zdeno Chara, and the second overall pick in the 2001 draft to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for forward Alexei Yashin. Zdeno Chara and the second overall pick in that draft for Alexei Yashin. Though Yashin would get his Islanders' career off to a good start with a 75-point season in 01-02, the Russian forward would struggle with injuries and see his production gradually decline, never reaching the 94-point or even the 88-point highs he found in Ottawa, as he scored 290 points in 346 games with the Islanders. Not bad numbers by any stretch, but compared to his 491 points in 504 games with Ottawa, it really wasn't ideal. Things definitely weren't helped by the fact that Milbury signed Yashin to a 10-year, $87.5 million contract just a few months after the trade, which was ultimately bought out a little over halfway through on June 6, 2007. This buyout meant that Alexei Yashin was then paid $2 million every single year until the 14-15 season, 8 years after Milbury left the GM position. On the flip side of this trade, Muckholt would play another season and a bit in the league before hanging up his skates, whilst Zdeno Chara would go on to become one of, if not the best defenseman of his generation. The Slovakian native still plays in the NHL to this day at 43 years old, is a 6-time All-Star, a Norris Trophy winner, a Stanley Cup champion, and currently sits at 656 points in 1,553 games. Want to know what makes this trade even worse than it already is? The second overall pick that was also included in this deal ended up being used to select forward Jason Spezza. So not only did Milbury trade away Zdeno Chara, but the Islanders also missed out on a 2-time All-Star, a 2-time 90-point scorer who has potted 940 points in 1,123 games, and who also still plays in the league to this day. I guess these are the deals you come to expect from a player who once beat a fan with his own shoe. Oh, and none of these trades even mention that Mike Milbury used the first overall pick in the 2000 entry draft to select goaltender Rick DiPietro. When players like Danny Heatley and Marian Gaborik were up for grabs, Milbury chose Rick DiPietro. Safe to say his drafting wasn't any better than his trade negotiating, was it? At least Milbury didn't sign DiPietro to that 15-year contract though. That was all Garth Snow's doing. Oh god, first Milbury, then Garth Snow? Islanders fans have had a real rough time these past few decades, haven't they? The years following this long list of poor trades saw Milbury continue to make similar deals with varying levels of success, but nothing nearly as blockbuster or downright awful as the Chara or Luongo trades. For example, on March 11th, 2003, Milbury made a pair of disappointing deals, sending goaltender and future Stanley Cup champion Chris Osgood, along with a 2003 third-round pick, to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for Justin Papineau and a 2003 second-round pick, as well as sending forwards Brad Isbista and Raffi Torres to Edmonton in exchange for Jan Niinimaa, a 2003 second-rounder and a 2003 fourth-rounder. However, on June 8, 2006, after 7 years exclusively working as the team's GM, it was announced that Mike Milbury had stepped down from his position in order to become the team's new senior vice president. Less than a year later, though, Milbury resigned from his new position and became a studio analyst for a variety of NHL broadcasts, a job he still serves to this day. So, after starting behind the bench and working his way up to the front office, after 11 years as a member of the franchise, what was the legacy that Mike Milbury left behind for the New York Islanders organization? Well, in the 10 seasons that Milbury worked for the Islanders, the team made the playoffs just 3 times. When they did punch their ticket to the postseason though, they were never even able to make it out of the first round. So in his decade of service with the team, Mike Milbury failed to win a single playoff series. Not only that, but in his continued pursuit of a deep playoff run, Milbury removed a long list of future greats in the league from his roster, including, but certainly not limited to, Wade Redden, Darius Kasparaitis, Todd Bertuzzi, Brian McCabe, Zygmunt Polfi, Tommy Salo, Olli Jokinen, Eric Brewer, and even Roberto Luongo and Zdeno Chara. The ironic part about all of this is, these very same players could have helped Milbury achieve that postseason goal if he had just been a little more patient and trusted his own organisation to develop all of this young talent. Milbury made matters even worse by trading the draft pick that became Jason Spezza, selecting Rick DiPietro over Danny Heatley and Marian Gaborik, and signing Alexei Yashin to a monster contract that was bought out roughly halfway through. If this decade of consistently awful roster decisions doesn't make the Islanders feel the most terrible buyer's remorse, I don't know what will. So, in conclusion, when the New York Islanders hired Mike Milbury back in July of 1995, it seemed to be a good move at the time. The former decade-long player in the league had shown that he was capable of coaching a team to the Stanley Cup Finals, and seemed ready to help return the Islanders to its dynasty days of the 80s. What actually happened was Milbury spent several years flip-flopping between coach and GM, dealt away a dozen players and prospects who would become mainstays in the league, some even still to this day, and damaged the franchise's roster, its prospect pool, and its reputation so badly that the organisation has only recently been able to move past his poor decisions in the last couple of years, well over a decade after he left the organisation. For Milbury, this contract gave him the job of a lifetime. For the Islanders, all they wanted was a refund. And that's why the hiring of Mike Milbury gave the New York Islanders all the buyer's remorse. What do you guys think about this hiring? Also, is there another acquisition, free agency, or trade deadline you would like me to look at as part of this series? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Antti Hannanen, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Paul Mallia, Jordan Whitehead, and Martin Tolness, as well as a huge thank you to Max Artis for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.